This is Akerman Street, beautiful bit of agger there on the Roman road that was. It travelled between Cirencester up across to Bicester, we're not too far from Bicester now, all the way down to St Albans, not their Roman names. Now we know there was a north-south link here that came up from Silchester, past Oxford on its east and up to Bicester. That's Margery Route 160 and well accepted. But as this video will show, it seems the story north of Oxford isn't quite that simple, because antiquarians of old and academics of new keep finding clues as to more routes north. This video is about how King Æthelred will help us find those missing links.
Hi, I'm Mark Moroney. I'm a fellow at Wolfson College and also the publisher and editor-in-chief of Antiquus magazine.
Now Mark is the proprietor of a cottage northeast-ish of Oxford, and he'd heard rumours about the local fields, and there was evidence of maybe a medieval floor, some kind of stonework, perhaps even an Anglo-Saxon.
All started with this book, John Buchan, The Blanket of the Dark, set in the Tudor period, and he mentions the protagonist, Peter Pentecost, found a floor mosaic in a place not really far from here. That led me to search for a long-lost Roman villa.
Now, if you've read any John Buchan books before, you know they're fictional, but you may also know that he researched these with significant detail, and now we have a coincidence on our hands because this one, chapter 1, is set on Mark's doorstep.
All generally in this area, and it's about a band of outlaws that existed, and it's a really interesting read.
So this is probably one of the best preserved bits of Roman road along this stretch, at least, that I could find. I'll put the camera down low so you can kind of see the level there that I'm looking at, and how well raised up that is. That's the main agger of Akerman Street. Really good to see. Up here, this is the middle. You're down there in the ditch, possibly the clay lined ditch for the horses to be easy on their hooves. Such was the coincidence of this read, the book that Mark had read. It was only maybe a couple of kilometres away from where he lived. Well, along came a global pandemic. Plenty of time on his hands. Mark set about trying to read the landscape and see if he could put this into the landscape. So a quick recap of the known routes in this area, because it will become important very shortly on Mark's journey. Now we have Akerman Street, the east-west route broadly, and we also have our north-south route, R160, the Silchester to Bicester route to the east of Oxford. Now broadly, where I stand with Mark now, well, we are between that route and Oxford itself. And as I say, as Mark's journey continues here, this becomes very important.
I think I was looking in too many places and not really following the obvious clues. The early phase of this investigation is I was given permission by the landowner to try and find this site, and the difficulty was it was so overgrown here.
Mark set about the research and he came across something quite staggering, truly. One area of research that I'm pretty poor at myself is Anglo-Saxon charters. They tend to provide some clues that really help us understand the landscape. What Mark found was absolutely staggering. Anglo-Saxon Charter B670 and K304, a specific line read Then Swayan in England Riftrigus hit cometh a fragen floren. Yeah, forgive the Old English there. So I was now on foot approaching Sturdy's castle, and I wanted to see how this north-south route interacted with Akerman Street. Difficult to tell because now it's quite a significant road and a junction here. The straight route through Kidlington is intriguing, and we'll come back to that later. South of here, Margery mentions nothing, but north he certainly does. I think we have Route 162.
The clue was walk along the streamlet until you reach the Flagon Forum, which is a paved floor, which could be a paved as in stone paving, or Anglo-Saxon scholars have suggested it's referring to a floor mosaic. That tantalising clue, we're stood next to the streamlet, which is now a ditch. That was really what drew me to this.
Another line in the charter, and we have a tantalising clue.
The next clue, the charter mentions two small hills, which close to where we are stood are two prehistoric tumuli. They date to the Bronze Age, so anything between, probably around between 2000 BC and 1500 BC.
You might be wondering why that's so staggering. Well, that charter that Mark came across himself too, well, John Buchan, 100 or so, maybe 130 years previous, when he was writing this book, this fiction book, well, he must have come across the same Anglo-Saxon charter as well. Let's remind ourselves what the words were in his book. And then on past the valley to the two hills and on to the painted floor. Now know that the evidence suggested that this charter was indeed in Cutteslowe.
The next thing was to look at the landscape and try and map the charter into the landscape.
Now, after a bit of searching around, Mark found exactly what he was looking for.
And it fitted perfectly. Well, I found lots of broken stone, stressed stone. The farmer did actually tell me that about 30 years ago he destroyed his tractor here when he was ploughing. He hit a wall, rode his tractor off. And then in the ditch here, the streamlet, the original streamlet in the charter, there was a very large dressed stone. And then I also found an elongated hexagonal roofing slab. That was another tantalising clue.
Now Mark wanted to have a look at the area in greater detail and managed to convince someone to get some geophysics done.
Well, we did some geophysics, which was the key to identifying exactly what lay beneath. There was a rectangular building. So as we were processing the data, there's always that moment as an archaeologist, you think, what if I'm not right? So as we were processing the data in the back of the Land Rover, Tony, my colleague, said, there's a building under there.
So that was that. Where does the road come into this? Because we have a Roman villa, a nice little mystery at that, but we don't have a formal road. We don't need a formal road for one single villa. Mark found another charter, this time from 1005 or 1006, and it read, Erist of PortStrete onto Trelwell. It is referring to King Æthelred granting 2 hides of land and other lands to St Freedswade, Oxford.
So I felt that there must be a Roman road in proximity to the villa. And then I started looking further to the west of here. Lo and behold, along the course of the Banbury Road is a Roman road.
So this charter highlighted that there was a formal route here, PortStrete. Port potentially meaning portway, a route of safety, and stretta, well, almost certainly meaning Roman road. But where did this portway go from here? Did it go up to the west towards Sturdy's castle, or did it go somewhere else? In actual fact, the route existed here in the first place, just north of Oxford, and maybe it would mean this villa had some significance.
When we did the geophysics, it became apparent there were 2 features that I couldn't explain initially, and then I realised they were fish ponds, because there's a villa about 20 miles away from here, near Northley, called Shaken Oak, and it's a very similar sized villa, and that has 2 fish ponds. The scenario is that this was a fish production villa, so obviously if you have fish ponds, you have a streamlet, there must be a source, and this is the Trill Spring that's mentioned in one of the charters.
Now, after some more research, it turns out we aren't the first people here to search for the portway near Kidlington.
There's a scholar who used to be based in Oxford, Eberhard Sauer, had justification to search for something, and he was looking for the Port Way, which was assumed to be the continuation of the road here, further north. But in fact, it's probably a branch of it, so he didn't find any evidence for it, because he was looking for a paved, logically a paved street.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this a little. We have the charter from King Æthelred with PortStrete mentioned on it just here. So where does it head north of this?
Well, it's interesting when you come out of Oxford, come up the Banbury Road, there's a place named there, Stratfield Road, I believe it's called, and then there is Stratfield Brake. The clues are there.
So we have potential for the Kidlington to Sturdy Castle route, but we have no other academic evidence from north of Stratfield Brake and Stratfield Farm where the PortStrete is mentioned. But then we looked on the map and we found some more evidence of the Portway. In fact, what I'm walking on right now, there's Portway Farm just there in the distance. This route is marked as the Portway on the modern OS maps and the old OS maps. We have Portway cottages ahead of us. There's much more evidence here, but this isn't north of Sturdy's castle. This one is much further east. So do we actually have 3 routes rather than 1 or 161, which Margery first said? And then there's one more thing to consider. You see, when I'm looking for Roman roads, I'm often just assuming it is a full-on agger, a full-on Roman road where I can show you, like I did earlier with Æthelred, a big hump in the ground where they would layer up upon layer and repair over the years, and we have a formal proper route, what was referred to as a via. But rarely on this channel do I ever take into consideration the smaller routes, the Iter for foot traffic, the Actus for the beast of burden, the pack horse and such like that. But this right now here, looking at Anglo-Saxon charters, names in the landscape, the Portway cottages, farm, the Portway, all refer back to some of those Anglo-Saxon charters we mentioned earlier, PortStrete. So when you find the word streta, 99% of the time you have a Roman road, but it doesn't have to be that formal route that I always interpret as a Roman road, no matter what. Sometimes it could be something smaller. So we may have 3 routes here serving various industries and villas. Each one went up to Æthelred in its own unique way, 160 being the first formal via up to Bicester, and then 2 other routes, perhaps repurposed, relayed, or just constructed and formalised in a non-military way later in the Roman era. The Kidlington route, the Portway in the centre, and of course to the east, Route 160. So if you enjoyed today's little adventure, well, you'll be pleased to know you can read a lot more about it in this magazine. Not a paid sponsorship, I've genuinely subscribed to this magazine for the last year, published by Mark, who obviously featured in today's video. I'll put the link in the description below. Well worth a read, various different civilisations, including obviously a lot about the Roman period. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click on subscribe and we'll see you this time next week.